What's up, fam? Welcome back to another chilling chapter. Before we dive into today's twisted mystery, Father Brown and One Clue solved the murder. Hit me up. What made you smile today, and where in the world are you listening from? I'm featuring your stories in the next drop, so don't be shy. Now grab your tea, dim the lights, and get ready. Because nothing in Whispers in the Fog is ever what it seems. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The Mysterious Death in the Pulpit. The morning mist hung heavily in the air of Kembleford, swirling lazily around the stoic gravestones nestled within the old churchyard. The chill of dawn had settled into the bones of the villagers, who hurried along cobbled lanes wrapped in scarves and heavy coats. At the edge of the square, the imposing silhouette of St. Mary's Church emerged, its spire piercing the low-hanging clouds, an ominous omen, perhaps, for what was to transpire within its hallowed walls. At the altar, surrounded by flickering candles and heavy incense, the congregation awaited an unusual sermon that day. The rustling of prayer books and muffled whispers filled the air as the clock chimed 8, and Father Alastair Whitaker, the parish priest with a reputation for fiery oratory, made his way to the pulpit. His hands, lightly trembling as they settled on the lectern, betrayed his usual composure. A sudden unease swept through the congregation, mingling with the tendrils of incense that curled like whispered secrets. Then, with little preamble, Father Whitaker collapsed, his body crumpling, as if it were a marionette with severed strings. A gasp erupted, sharp and collective, sending a ripple through the pews. In an instant, the air thickened with panic, a palpable tension replacing the reverent silence. As villagers rushed to their fallen priest, nervous murmurs consumed the congregation. It was at that moment that Father Brown entered, stepping into the church with a quiet urgency that belied the chaos. His eyes, sharp and observant, took in the tableau before him. Panic-stricken faces, the lingering scent of burnt candle wax, and the distant echo of storm clouds gathering over the horizon. Even before he knelt beside the unconscious priest, he sensed that this was no mere accident. Foul play had woven its insidious threads through the very fabric of Kembleford. "Fetch the doctor," a voice cried from the gathered crowd, but Father Brown raised a hand, a silent command that stilled their frantic movements. "Do not disturb him, I implore you," he said, careful to keep his tone steady amid the rising clamor. "It is essential we observe his condition with due respect. Gather round, yet allow him his space." He leaned closer to Father Whitaker, whose brow glistened with sweat. There was no sign of seizure, no evidence of natural causes. Yet the faint blue tinge around his lips spoke of something sinister, of poison perhaps. Father Brown's mind raced, memories of the sharp-tongued parish priest's recent sermon echoing in his ears. What had he said that had stirred such animosity? As the doctor finally arrived, pushing through the throng of frightened parishioners, Father Brown noticed Miss Ethel Barrow, the church's housekeeper, hovering near the back of the gathering. Her hands twisted at her apron, anxiety etched across her wrinkled face. Too anxious to observe from a distance, she appeared torn between concern for her priest and something darker lurking just beneath the surface. "Miss Barrow," Father Brown called, beckoning her forth. Her wide eyes filled with apprehension as she moved towards him. Was there something amiss before the service? Did Father Whitaker seem unwell? I noticed he was different," she stammered, her hands clenching tighter. "He had strange visitors the past few days, men from the town, gentlemen who came and went in whispers. They were never formal, never sought a confession. They left him looking worried. A frown creased Father Brown's brow. Different how? More than his sermons, his passions, Miss Barrow continued, glancing about as if fearful of being overheard. He was restless, as if he bore a heavy burden. Time slipped through his fingers, and he didn't speak of the burden, only that he'd known the truth long before. As the doctor checked Father Whitaker's pulse, silence fell heavily. A distant peal of thunder rumbled, seeming to announce turbulent revelations hovering on the cusp of a storm. Father Brown's mind sparked to life. There was a buried motive laid deep in the priest's recent actions, and the mysterious men that Miss Barrow had mentioned could hold the key. Think, Ethel, Father Brown pushed gently. Did you hear anything they said? This burden he carried, was it worth dying over? I can't say for sure, she replied, her voice wavering. But one of them spoke of a will, of a grave injustice. But what the injustice was, I couldn't tell. As the urgency built, the doctor hastily called for help, and the church quickly descended into whirlwinding chaos once more. Father Brown stepped back, the weight of the conundrum heavy upon him. He turned to survey his surroundings, where the quaint church transformed into a scene rife with cloaked intentions. If Father Whitaker had encountered danger, it undertook its approach, masked behind the facade of friendly faces. Which of the villagers carried a heart shadowed by malice, and who among them stood innocent in the presence of a man now teetering on the brink of death? Father Brown straightened and stepped into the milling crowd, his voice cutting through the confusion. I would like to speak with all of you. Each of you may hold a fragment of the truth. The congregation fell silent, eyes wide and expectant, and with the furor of the moment subverted, he seized the chance. Let us not forget, Father Brown said, glancing back at the doctor's anxious ministrations, a man's life hangs by a thread, one that might yet unravel all that binds this village together. But within him, a quiet certainty began to take form, a suspicion that whispered deeper than simple intrigue. Someone had sought to silence Father Whitaker forever, and the question that now gripped him was not just whether the priest would survive, but who among the faithful would find their lives irrevocably changed by the answers they sought. In a hushed moment, just as the lightning lighted the sky in chaotic splendor, Father Brown caught sight of a slip of paper tumbling from Father Whitaker's unsteady grasp, fluttering like a fallen multitude of knowledge. As it hit the cobblestone beneath him, it was the stillness of the storm that beckoned him forward, heart pounding with the promise of revelation. There, inscribed upon it, were intricate details of the very allegation that was meant to lead to the priest's ruin. The clause of a will, written in the narrow hand of a man who sought to settle accounts, but at what cost? Before he could bend to retrieve it, shadow loomed, and all at once Father Brown realized his life was suddenly hanging in the balance as destinies danced at an immutable crossroads. Chapter 2. A letter arrived too late. The fog wrapped itself around the village of Kembleford like a shroud, stifling sound and dulling the colors of autumn. Father Brown, accustomed to the sights and sounds of his parish, walked the creaky path toward St. Mary's Church with a brisk pace, sensing the shadows of unease lingering in the air. It was just days since the tragic death of Lady Margaret Renshaw at the estate of Blackwood Manor, and something far more sinister hung over the village than mere grief. As he reached the old oak doors of the church, he noticed Mrs. Lingwood, the churchwarden, standing by the doorway, her hands wringing nervously around a crumpled letter. There was a stricken look upon her face, shadows deepening the lines of her brow. "Oh, Father, Mrs. Lingwood, he called gently, sensing the urgency in her eyes. What troubles you? Startled, she glanced around, as if to ensure they were alone. It's this letter, Father. It arrived this morning, but it's addressed to Lady Renshaw. The postmark is from 5 days ago. Her voice quivered with disbelief. I don't know what to do with it. What if it's important? Father Brown's heart quickened as he took the letter from her. The envelope was yellowed and weathered, the ink of the address fading yet legible. May I? He asked, gesturing toward the letter. She nodded and he opened it carefully, reading the elegant script inside. My dearest Margot, it began, an affectionate tone, warm yet urgent. I must implore you to meet me at our usual place under the ancient oak by the brook. I have information of utmost importance regarding your family. Tension crackled in the air as he read on. The letter detailing a promise of revelation, threats against the Renshaw family, and a plea for secrecy. Father Brown's brow furrowed as he finished the last line. Please, do not delay. I fear it may be too late, but I must warn you. Who sent this? He inquired, showing Mrs. Lingwood the name that seemed deliberately obscured. A faint smudge on the page. Only the initials, a T. That's all I could find, Father. And it was in a different envelope. The whole matter stinks of mystery. A mystery indeed, he mused, his voice contemplative. Do you know anyone who might have written such a letter? Mrs. Lingwood pressed her lips together. Well, none come to mind, and I suspect there are secrets here in Kembleford that have yet to be unearthed. Lady Renshaw was not as well liked, but threats? The idea seems outrageous. Perhaps it was not just herself that was threatened, Father Brown suggested thoughtfully, setting the letter aside. Family secrets can be dark and tangled. The key may lie in who benefited the most from her absence. Before Mrs. Lingwood could respond, a heavy footfall echoed down the church path. Lucas Cray, the Renshaw's estate manager, arrived, his face a mask of rigidity. Father, he called, a note of urgency in his voice, I must speak with you about Lady Renshaw's last days. I fear they may be connected to this misfortune. The two exchanged a glance, and before they could venture further into the church's thick, incense-laden air, he continued. The household was in uproar, even before she died. Tensions were palpable between Lady Renshaw and her son Charles. He was desperate for her approval, yet there was a rumor. Father Brown raised an eyebrow. Rumors can be treacherous, Lucas, but I gather you believe this to be more than mere gossip? Indeed, a significant sum had gone missing from the estate. Lady Renshaw had dismissed it, based on her trust in me, yet I suspected Charles. He has grown resentful, carrying burdens of past indiscretions. The priest nodded slowly, piecing the fragments of this intricate web together. And what of her daughter, Lily? Ah, Lily, Lucas sighed. She keeps to herself, often escaping to the woodlands, but I noticed her sneaking glances into her mother's affairs. Since their falling out a month ago, the girl has been restless. Father Brown's mind raced. Family feuds, a brother's resentment, a daughter's escape. The strands tightened around the Renshaw family like noose within a noose. Tell me more, Lucas. Did either Charles or Lily seem aware of Lady Renshaw's state of mind prior to her death? I am not sure, he replied, visibly strained. But I overheard quiet arguments. I have the sense that Charles was trying to protect a secret. But Lily? She seemed distracted by something else entirely, as if she were waiting for the other shoe to drop. The other shoe, Father Brown repeated, his mind churning with calculations. He felt the weight of the unopened letter drawing his attention back. There is something missing, something important to this puzzle. The urgency speaks of a deeper conspiracy. Lucas looked at him, confusion etched across his forehead. "What do you suspect, Father?" Just then, a heavy thud from the direction of the churchyard cut through, the murmur of their conversation sending both men darting outside. A slate tombstone had fallen, a crack echoing through the air like a gunshot, revealing the name etched in stone: Thomas Renshaw, Lady Margaret's grandfather. As they rushed closer, Father Brown's keen eyes caught a glimpse of a sinister detail, something wedged into the cracked earth beside the tombstone. He knelt down, heart racing, as he pulled a small, crumpled object from the soil. It was a ring, tarnished by the passage of years, the crest of Renshaw. "What does this mean?" Lucas breathed, pale with the realization that they had unwittingly unearthed a secret that should have remained buried. Father Brown's gaze swept back to the fog-shrouded manor in the distance, the gathering darkness obscuring any hope of answers. "It means," he said slowly, "that the letter may have arrived too late, but the truth is just beginning to emerge." With that, an eerie silence enveloped them as dusk settled over Kembleford, leaving them at the edge of an unmarked grave, the ring clutched tightly in Father Brown's hand, hinting at horrors yet to be discovered in their relentless pursuit of the truth. Chapter 3. The Heir Who Never Came Home. The mist clung to the creaking oaks and draped the village of Kembleford in a shroud of whispering secrets as Father Brown crossed the threshold of St. Mary's Church. The dampness permeated the air, a reminder of the chilling events that had unfolded, leaving the villagers on the cusp of unease. The master of Thornbury Manor, Lord Alastair Montgomery, had yet to return from his trip abroad, and whispers of his errant heir only heightened the tension. In the quiet of the church, the faint flicker of candles danced against the stone walls, sending shadows spiraling in a macabre ballet. Father Brown paused, his keen eyes surveying the empty pews. An unsettling feeling washed over him. It was more than the absence of the usual congregants. Today felt different. The rumble of unspoken fears resonated within these sacred walls. As he began to prepare for the midday service, a frantic knock echoed through the church. It was Mrs. Gladys Hargrove, a village housekeeper, her face ashen and eyes wide with burgeoning dread. "Father, you must come quickly. They found something at the manor." Frustration coiled around Brown's heart as he gathered his coat and followed her, both gaunt figures cutting through the mist-laden village streets. "What have they found, Mrs. Hargrove?" he inquired, sensing there was more to her distress than she conveyed. Her breath came in quick gasps. "A body, Father. They reckon it's the heir, young Tobias. Montgomery, he hasn't been home since last Thursday." The walk to Thornbury Manor was sombre. Tucked behind ancient oaks, its towering turrets loomed against the sombre sky, casting long shadows over the undergrowth. Brown's mind raced, connecting the dots. The missing heir, the peculiar events surrounding Lord Montgomery's sudden trip, the distant echoes of familial discord he had overheard in whispers at the market. Inside the drawing room, the atmosphere was thick with apprehension. The air was filled with the muted sobs of Lady Edith, Lord Montgomery's wife, her hands trembling as she held a lace handkerchief to her face. The housekeeper stood stiffly beside her, an aide clutching a silver tray of untouched tea. In the center, the figure of Tobias lay, pale and lifeless, draped elegantly across an armchair, his once vibrant attire now dappled with signs of struggle. Tufts of grass beneath his fingernails, a smear of crimson on the collar of his waistcoat. Father Brown approached, his heart heavy with foreboding. "What do we know?" A wiry constable, already sweating under the gravity of the scene, stated the obvious. "No signs of forced entry. It looks as though he was brought in here." "Or was he already here?" Brown interjected, his gaze sweeping the room. "Lady Montgomery, when was the last time you saw your son?" Sniffling, she looked up, her eyes clouded with grief. "I saw him just before he left for that dreadful meeting with his father. Alistair was furious with him about something. I thought it was merely a quarrel." "A quarrel that may have turned fatal," the constable added dubiously, wiping his brow as if to dispel the fog of suspicion hanging in the air. Father Brown examined the body, feeling an intense pull towards the young man's last moments. The position of Tobias's limbs suggested discomfort, but not fear. Nothing about the scene screamed murder at first glance, yet Brown sensed there were deeper undercurrents stirring within this tragedy. As he scrutinized the room, his eyes flitted from the pristine photographs on the mantel, the Montgomery legacy, all smiles in their gilded frames, to a set of letters half hidden beneath a tapestry. It was then that a thought flickered in his mind, like the candles in the church. "Anyone care to wager why the heir was brought into this room, rather than the more private study or his own chambers?" Brown asked, stepping back to survey the room anew. Lady Montgomery's nervous fiddling with her shawl seemed to tighten. She stammered, I don't know what you mean." "Think, Lady Edith. If Tobias had indeed returned, an important meeting was perhaps necessary. Was he meeting someone here? Someone he trusted?" At that moment, a sound outside the drawing room caught their attention. A muted scream. They rushed towards the window, peering out into the overgrown garden where a figure stumbled back, oblivious to the dew-drenched shrubbery clutching at their skirts. It was Isabella, the Montgomery's daughter, her wide eyes meeting those of her mother with a mixture of horror and helplessness. "Isabella!" cried Lady Montgomery, rushing outside. The atmosphere thickened with mounting tension, and with it a disquiet ripple spread like wildfire. Father Brown remained poised, observation his paramount virtue. He turned his attention back to the letters, picking them up and studying the handwriting. All correspondence from abroad, he mused, or something more intimate. Isabella re-entered the room with an expression of dread. "What has happened? Why is Tobias—" Her voice trembled as she caught sight of her brother's lifeless form. "Did you know about your brother's associations? He was drawing closer to someone outside the family, was he not?" Isabella paled further, recoiling slightly. I think it may have been serious." The clangor of the grandfather clock reverberated, its oppressing tick-tock punctuating an ominous pause. Brown turned the letter, exposing a faint trace of signature, a swirl of ink barely legible where desperation had hastened the pen. "What on earth?" he murmured. Isabella brightened momentarily, her voice a crescendo of hope. "Father, we must find the others, his friends from London, the ones who must know." Indeed. Brown's heart raced as he tucked the letter carefully into his coat pocket. Whatever had bound the Montgomery family in grief concealed darker truths. As the door to the manor swung to close behind them, a solitary crow cawed harshly from the oak, cutting through the stillness outside. Father Brown had a profound sense that they were not merely mourning the heir who would not come home. They were unraveling a tapestry of deceit that ran far deeper than any of them had anticipated. And somewhere in the shadows was the seeker of truth, who had been hiding in plain sight. As he took a step forward, the door creaked ominously behind him, leaving Father Brown only with the echo of his next deduction, sending ripples of anxiety through the fog-laden air. Could the heir's death unveil a betrayal far more sinister? Chapter 4. Secrets in the Shadows. The mist curled over the cobblestones of Kembleford's main street, clinging to the ground like the hushed whispers of secrets long buried. Father Brown walked briskly, his hands tucked within the folds of his weathered coat, keen eyes scanning the silhouettes cast against the dim light of the oil lamps. It was in this unassuming village that shadows held memories, and where the sudden shout of a voice would shatter the tranquility like glass underfoot. "Help! Oh, please help!" The scream echoed from the direction of the old Wimbledale Manor, home to the reclusive Lady Agatha Wimbledale, whose solitary existence had become the subject of much local gossip. Father Brown quickened his pace, the sound of his footsteps muted by the thick fog. He reached the entrance just as a group had gathered, their faces lit with a blend of anxiety and curiosity. In the center of the crowd, a young maid thrashed against the hands of two villagers. Her cheeks were stained with tears, and wild eyes spoke of a fright that went beyond youthful hysteria. It's the lady," she gasped. "She lies on the floor, motionless." Father Brown edged closer, aware that hysteria could warp reality. "What happened, my dear?" he asked gently, the urgency in his voice softened by an underlying calm. The girl broke free from the grip of the villagers and stared wide-eyed at him. "I went to deliver her breakfast. When I entered, she was pale, the room a mess, papers scattered everywhere." Her hand trembled as she gestured toward the manor's looming entrance, shrouded almost entirely in shadow. Then I heard something, a thud. Something must have happened. Father Brown nodded thoughtfully, his mind already spinning connections. "And what of the papers? Was there anything specific you saw?" "Yes, a letter marked with a strange crest, not of our village." Her voice caught, fear creeping back into her gaze. "I didn't dare touch it." "Then we must see." A grim determination solidified in Father Brown's heart as he exchanged knowing glances with the bewildered villagers. He pushed through the growing crowd, the air dense with tension. Creaking floorboards met his cautious steps as he entered the manor. Inside, the grand hall revealed itself in muted splendor, but behind 5 newspapers lay scattered like fallen leaves after a storm, each one a fragment of some deeper story. Father Brown stepped lightly, calling for the maid to follow. "Lead the way, dear girl." At the doorway to Lady Wimbledale's chamber, the maid hesitated. I cannot face it again." "Fear not," he reassured her. "We are to uncover the truth." He pushed open the heavy door to find Lady Wimbledale slumped at her writing desk, surrounded by an array of scattered papers, her distinguished face frozen in a time-hallowed repose. A quick glance suggested she was still breathing, but it was the presence of a faint, strange aroma that caught Father Brown's attention. It wasn't merely her solitary life that intrigued him now. It was the scent of almonds lingering in the air like an uninvited guest. As he examined the desk, the maid peered in hesitantly. What do you see?" "Life is often hidden in plain sight," Father Brown murmured, his fingers skimming over the letters. "These are no mere correspondences." He carefully unfolded the topmost letter, revealing an ornate crest, a lion surmounted by a star, an emblem of a noble lineage he did not recognize. "This doesn't belong to a typical local family," he continued, the shadows in the room flickering oddly, and judging by the muted ink and elaborate flourishes, it appears to be a correspondence of significance, perhaps a plea or even a threat. The maid's eyes widened. A threat? There is much to ponder, Father Brown said, transitioning to the matter of her encountered danger. Was anyone else in the house this morning? I believe young Mr. Johnson was here, she stammered. The estate's gardener, but he left earlier than usual. Perhaps he has knowledge that we lack. Father Brown frowned as shadows around the widow deepened, the mystery of the estate thickening with each passing moment. Sliding the letter into his pocket, he felt the weight of implications, and in that tangible fear, the truth began carving itself out of darkness. Just then, the sound of crashing glass erupted from below, sending both the maid and Father Brown spiraling back on alert. The panic whispered through the hall, fingers of dread lacing around their throats. "Stay here," he commanded, before hastening back to the entrance, where a figure emerged, not the gardener, but a stocky man with rough hands, known for his unsavory dealings. "Mr. Baker?" Father Brown's brow furrowed as the man glanced nervously over his shoulder. "What brings you here?" "I heard the ruckus," Baker mumbled, but the unease dripping from his words suggested he had come for more than mere curiosity. "Is the lady all right? I shall help, if need be." "Help?" Father Brown echoed, glancing back toward the chamber. "Or hinder, perhaps?" A sardonic smile tugged at Baker's lips. "No need to worry, Father. We're all just keeping secrets in the shadows." Before Father Brown could discern the meaning in the words, the maid emerged from behind him. "Something isn't right," she whispered. "You should never have come here, Mr. Baker." And suddenly, as if the shadows themselves had conspired, a loud bang echoed from the other side of the house. Without thinking, Father Brown turned, his heart racing, and hurried toward the sound, each footfall echoing as if hastening into the jaws of fate. He needed to understand the reality buried under fear. But the mystery was getting deeper, threats simmering in the shadows, as the figure that flitted past him glanced back, a moment of utterly profound recognition exchanging between them before they vanished into the depths of the manor. As the lingering scent of almonds haunted the air, Father Brown realized this web was ensnaring him more tightly with each thread he pulled. The meaning of secrets lay hidden in the shadows, and the truth behind Lady Wimbledale's plight teetered on the precipice of revelation. He could feel the darkness gathering, the enormity of what waited just beyond reach filling him with unease. In that moment, he understood they were perilously close to uncovering a truth darker than even he had anticipated, one that would unravel in Chapter 5. Chapter 5. The Vanishing Suspect. The air hung heavy with the scent of impending rain as Father Brown stepped into the rectory kitchen, the worn floorboards creaking beneath his feet. Mrs. McCarthy was buzzing with the energy of the anxious. The Mullins had been missing for hours now, and the entire village was cloaked in a pall of unease. But before Father Brown could ask about the missing couple, a scream cut through the kitchen, a piercing, shrill outcry that sent every heart racing. "What in heaven's name was that?" he murmured, crossing himself instinctively before dashing out into the misty twilight. As he bolted into the dimly lit hallway, the source of the commotion became alarmingly apparent. Felicity Wyndham, the village postmistress, stood at the base of the stairs, her auburn hair disheveled, her breath ragged. "It's gone! It's simply vanished," she gasped, her eyes wide with fright. "What's gone, Felicity?" Father Brown asked, his voice steady. The letter I..." Received from Mr. Mullin. She struggled to catch her breath, clutching the banister. He came in just after his wife. A strange man followed him into the post office. I swear I saw him slip something into Mr. Mullin's hand before he left. Now it's gone. A lady in town must have seen him. You know how gossipy we all are. The priest felt a chill slide down his spine. Mullin had been one of the last to be seen alive, but now even the very correspondence tying him to his fate had vanished. We need to find that letter, Felicity. It might be the only key to understanding what's happened to the Mullins. As they hurried back outside, the shadows of the village stretched long and eerie. Glancing toward the small stone church at the far end of the village square, Father Brown felt the chill in the air deepen. What if the Mullins had been victims of something far more sinister than the peculiarities of village life? "Felicity," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper, "did you recognize the man who followed Mr. Mullin?" A stranger, a tall fellow in an old coat, with a hat pulled low. I thought he seemed out of place, but... Her voice trailed off as she bit her lip. But who could believe ill of him? Not here in Kembleford. Father Brown looked deeply into her eyes, seeking the truth that lay buried beneath the surface. And yet, the villagers speak of strange occurrences around him, do they not? Felicity shifted uneasily. Aye, they do. Whispers of bad blood, but nothing but rumors. Rumors can often cloak the truth, he murmured. Let's check the church. Perhaps the night has more to offer than conventional virtue. Arriving at the church, the atmosphere took on a weightier form. The ancient stones seemed to be witnesses to secrets long buried. As they entered, shadows flickered before them, cast by the dim, flickering oil lamps. The priest knelt briefly, offering a silent prayer for guidance before rising to examine the small bulletin board tucked beside the altar. Noticing a hastily pinned note, he paused. The writing was shaky, and the crimson ink had smeared slightly. He squinted, deciphering the careful script. The darkest secrets of Kembleford lie where the mist gathers most thick. Felicity looked over his shoulder, her brow knitted in confusion. What do you make of it, Father? Mist is a curious cloak. It conceals and reveals all at once. Father Brown tapped the note. It speaks of secrets. Secrets that may involve the Mullins. And where else is the mist thick enough to hide? The old manor at the edge of Green's Wood. As the urgency in his voice heightened, the postmistress's face paled. Oh, Father, the manor has been abandoned for decades. Folk say it's cursed. Curses do not frighten me, he replied decisively. Only the dark corners of men's hearts. Come, we must find Mr. Mullin's fate before it slips into the shadows forever. With the note folded safely in his pocket, they made their way cautiously through the village. The mist thickened as they approached the manor, winding around the gnarled trees like fingers longing for the light. The once grand structure loomed overhead, covered in creeping ivy and broken windows that gazed down like empty eyes. They entered cautiously, the creaking door groaning in protest. Inside, an unsettling silence greeted them, broken only by the sound of their footsteps echoing on the dust-laden floor. Father Brown scanned the room, where spectral furniture lay shrouded beneath grimy sheets. In the far corner, he spotted an overturned table, its surface littered with faded scraps of paper. Approaching it, he knelt, sifting through the remnants of a forgotten life. One page caught his eye. It had been hastily scrawled, but was still legible. I did it for the sake of my family. Forgive me. Suddenly, a movement caught his eye, and Felicity gasped as they were graced by an unexpected visitor. A figure loomed in the half-light, a tall man with a hat pulled low. "Who's there?" Father Brown called, his heart racing. The figure stepped forward, revealing a striking resemblance to the sketches of Mr. Mullin. But it was the wild look in his eyes that froze Father Brown in his tracks. "Father, you must listen," the man cried, but as he took another step, the shadows enveloped him, swallowing him whole. "Felicity," Father Brown shouted, his pulse quickening. "Where did he go?" "I swear, Father, he was right here." Before she finished her line, the last faint outlines of the man disappeared into the opacity of the mist, and Father Brown felt an acute sense of urgency. They had lost him, just like they'd lost the letter. But did the circumstances align, or were they merely stepping into a darker web of secrets? Clenching his jaw, Father Brown turned to Felicity, determination burning in his gaze. "That man knows something crucial. We must find out who he is, and why he's vanished. The scent of treachery grows thicker than this cursed fog. Our prayers must work hard tonight. Beyond these walls lie the secrets begging to be unveiled." As he spoke, the church bell tolled ominously in the distance, and an air of inevitability enveloped them. One question filled the void. Would they be able to trace the shadows back to the truth, or would they too vanish into the encroaching darkness? Chapter 6. The Key to the Puzzle. The first light of dawn barely penetrated the thick veil of mist hanging over Kembleford, curling among the gravestones in the churchyard like the remnants of lost dreams. A loud crash echoed through the quiet village, breaking the morning stillness and drawing Father Brown's attention. He emerged from the north aisle of St. Mary's Church just as Mrs. Hargrove, the parishioner known for her brusque demeanor and broad-brimmed hat, stumbled out of the shadows. "Father, you must come quickly," she shouted, her voice trembling. Father Brown adjusted his spectacles and set off in quick strides toward the source of the commotion, Hargrove Hall. The manor, draped in the ivy of centuries, bore witness as the villagers clustered around its entrance, their anxious faces illuminated by the weak morning light. "What happened?" he inquired. But before he got an answer, a figure emerged from the door. Young Timothy Hargrove, his shirt stained with the remnants of an unsettling encounter. "It's my mother. She's—" Timothy's words faltered as he looked back toward the threshold of the hall. Father Brown stepped closer, his heart sinking as the youth's face contorted in anguish. "Is she injured?" She's—" Timothy swallowed hard. "She's dead." The word hung in the air, heavy as the damp mist. Father Brown felt his stomach twist as he entered the manor, the familiar creak of the old floorboards underfoot a haunting welcome. The grand hall, once vibrant with the chatter of guests and the laughter of family, now felt morose. A once finely adorned chandelier swayed eerily, casting lopsided shadows against the walls, the remnants of a recent dinner highlighting the warmth that had been snuffed out. In the library, Mrs. Hargrove lay sprawled across the crimson carpet, the ornate rug soaked with blood, the tapestry of her life now reduced to threads of tragedy. Father Brown knelt beside her, noting the peculiar angle of her head, the pallor of her skin, the slight smile frozen on her lips, a gruesome paradox. It hinted not merely at death, but at something darker, a final act of betrayal, perhaps. "Who was here last?" he asked Timothy, striving for calm amidst the storm of emotion. "Only those who live here. My father, my mother, and me," Timothy said, his demeanor teetering at the edge of shock. "I was upstairs when I heard the scream." Father Brown's mind raced, zeroing in on the clues presented in this tragic tableau. Did you notice anything unusual before the incident? Any unfamiliar visitors? Timothy frowned, shaking his head as he glanced toward the door. The subtle quiver of his lips suggested something unsaid. My mother had been acting strange lately. She received letters that she kept hidden from us. Intrigued, Father Brown pressed, "Letters? Were they not from your father?" "No," Timothy replied, anxiety sharp in his tone. "I do not know who sent them. She wouldn't tell me." Father Brown recalled the earlier, reminiscing of the townsfolk. Mrs. Hargrove was known to engage in clandestine meetings in the evenings. It seemed that the air of secrecy had hung about her like lingering smoke. Turning his attention to the room, he surveyed the cluttered shelves of books, but one stood out, an ornate volume on medieval heraldry perched out of place. It was stained with ink, as if someone had slipped a note into its pages hurriedly. Reaching for it, Father Brown hesitated at the sudden memory of a scuffle, a whispered name that ignited doubts long buried. With a quick motion, he opened the book and found a folded piece of parchment tucked inside. The handwriting was careful, deliberate, with the looping curls of an emphatic penmanship. It bore a name that turned Father Brown's blood cold. Gideon Pritchard, a man recently returned to Kembleford, notorious for his strategic cunning and long-buried grudge against the Hargroves. Timothy sighed heavily as he peered over the father's shoulder. "What is that?" "Something that sheds light on shadows," Father Brown replied, and set down the book emotionally charged. "I may have found the key to this puzzle, but more importantly, I suspect someone very close to us is responsible." Timothy's brow furrowed. "Close? You don't mean—" "I cannot make assumptions just yet," Father Brown cut him off, holding up a hand. "But there is a connection we must uncover. For instance, did your father see anyone unusual last night?" "No. He retired early," Timothy said. His gaze shifted as though receiving a revelation. "Though he did leave the library door ajar until late." At that moment, Giles Hargrove stepped into the library, his face pale, but his eyes fierce, flickering with defiance. "What are you doing in here?" he barked, menacingly protective of the sanctuary that housed so much pain. "Merely seeking the truth, Mr. Hargrove," Father Brown replied, the air thickening with unspoken motives. "Your wife—" "Don't," Giles interrupted, a novel, heartbreak gleaming in his eyes. "You can't lay blame without proof. Every puzzle contains pieces that may not fit the way we imagine," Father Brown observed, his tone steady. "But the question remains, what was your wife hiding?" Just then, a distant cry echoed through the hall, stark and chilling. Timothy rushed toward the door, unable to stifle a yelp of shock. "Father, the stables!" "Stay back," Father Brown commanded, feeling the threads of danger tighten, heart racing. Abandoning the library's intrigue, he followed Timothy out of the manor, uncertainty gripping him. The mist had thickened, clinging more tightly about the stables, where the horses stamped nervously against their stalls. But when they reached the darkened corner, the sight before them froze Father Brown in awareness. An overturned lantern and a handkerchief embroidered with a distinctive initial lay scattered on the ground. A picture was beginning to emerge, but with it, new questions crowded into Father Brown's mind. What confrontation lay ahead, and who else would fall victim to passion's long festering? Timothy gasped as he picked up the handkerchief. "This belongs to my mother. What does it mean, Father?" As Father Brown regarded the softly shimmering fabric, the echoes of grief and betrayal loomed large, wrapping around him like a shroud. The key to this puzzle, may well lie in the hands of those who dare to keep secrets, and I fear, Timothy, that we are not yet finished unraveling this tragic tale." He turned, eyes narrowing at the shadows gathering at the edge of the stables, sensing that in this village of whispers, not all were prepared to face their truths. The weight of the next revelation hung in the air, tantalizingly close, yet shrouded in uncertainty, a promise of impending doom. Chapter 7. A glimpse into the past. The air was thick with an oppressive mist as Father Brown made his way to Kembleford Manor, the grand estate that loomed like a ghostly spectre in the damp morning light. He had barely stepped over the threshold when he was met with a disturbance, the sharp sound of a glass shattering against the polished wooden floor. He rushed into the drawing-room, where Lady Agatha Wainwright stood, trembling over what remained of her precious crystal decanter. "I can't believe it," she gasped, her voice quivering like the frail glass shards at her feet. "It was just here, Father. I swear I saw it. The portrait, it's missing." Intrigued, Father Brown approached the wall, where the once proud portrait of Sir Bertram Wainwright had hung. Now, only a dusty outline remained, revealing that something sinister lurked just beneath the surface. "Are you certain it wasn't removed for cleaning?" he asked, arching an eyebrow. Lady Agatha's eyes widened. "No, it was meant to be left alone until the anniversary. It had been a dark reminder of the past." Father Brown glanced at the empty frame, a chilling realization dawning on him. A reminder of what precisely? "The night he died," she replied, biting her lip. "His fall down the stairs, it was shrouded in mystery. Many thought it was an accident." She hesitated, the weight of grief pressing down on her thin shoulders. "But in this family, nothing ever stays buried." Father Brown studied her carefully. "You hinted at the notion that there may be something more to it. What do you truly believe happened?" A breeze shifted through the open window, and the faint sound of church bells echoed in the distance. Lady Agatha turned her gaze toward the vast grounds of the manor, her expression carved from sorrow and resentment. "My husband had enemies, Father. Many did not approve of his ambitions." "Ambitions?" Father Brown leaned in, intrigued. "What sort?" A shadow crossed Agatha's face, as though the ghost of a distant memory haunted her. "Power, control," she murmured. "He had plans for the estate, which the villagers loathed. But it is my daughter, Melanie, who seems to carry the weight of their disdain upon her slender shoulders." Father Brown considered Lady Agatha's words, intrigued by this deeper layer of motive. "And how does your daughter feel about her father's legacy?" "She resents him, and yet there is complicity in her silence." Lady Agatha sighed, sitting heavily in a chair, allowing her frailty to take over. She always longed to be free of his shadow. As if summoned by fate, the door to the drawing-room swung open, allowing Melanie Wainwright to enter with a haughty air that belied her inner turmoil. "What's all this fuss about, Mother? Another trifle of yours?" Her voice dripped with sarcasm, yet Father Brown noticed the slight tremor in her hands. "We've lost more than just a family heirloom, my dear," Lady Agatha replied softly, her eyes pleading for understanding. Melanie's gaze darted towards the empty frame. "Father's portrait is just another symbol of a past we cannot change. What matters is the future, isn't it?" She stood tall, as if trying to project strength. "Is that what you believe?" Father Brown probed, maintaining his gentle tone. "That the past can simply be sanitized, wiped clean like that shattered glass?" "I believe in facts," she shot back, her ire igniting. "People die, Father, and we must move on. We can't dwell forever in shadows. Perhaps you fear the shadows more than you admit, Father Brown suggested, his keen instincts surging. Are you so certain your father's death was merely an accident? Melanie's expression hardened. What does it matter now? It is a burden we must all carry, isn't it? You think it's a burden? Lady Agatha cut in, a tremor in her voice. It's a weight we cannot escape. Melanie, you know. As the tides of tension mounted, a sound from outside the manor shattered their escalating quarrel. A loud crash could be heard, followed by a strangled cry. Father Brown dashed toward the window, peering out into the swirling mist that blanketed the grounds. Melanie, stay here, he commanded. I must see what has happened. Without hesitating, he pushed open the door to the outside world, where the fog seemed to rise from the ground, like ghosts lifting their veils. There, sprawled upon the ground, lay the lifeless body of Mr. Alex Hargrove, the local historian, renowned for his conspiracy theories surrounding the Wainwright family and their dark past. A crowd had begun to gather, the whispers weaving around him like strands of fear. He was fine, just moments before, declared one voice. Did he trip, or was he pushed? Father Brown felt a chill run through him. With every passing second, his mind raced through the stories he had gleaned. Alex had dedicated his life to uncovering hidden truths, truths that might have rattled the fragile facade of the Wainwrights. He knelt beside the fallen man and discovered an unmistakable object clasped tightly in his hand, a carefully folded letter bearing the Wainwright family crest. Father Brown's heart raced, for in that moment he realized that the clues to the past were being unearthed with deadly consequences. Turning back toward the manor, he called for Lady Agatha and Melanie, both of whom stood frozen on the threshold, shadows of doubt, mingling with disbelief. You must come quickly, Father Brown urged, the weight of their family's dark history pressing upon them. The past is stirring and seeking vengeance, and I fear we have only glimpsed the surface of what lies beneath. As the bell tolled mournfully in the distance, signifying the hour, Father Brown felt the threads of tragedy weave even tighter, a tapestry of hidden motives and buried sins. With a decisive heart, he took a step toward the unfolding maze of mystery, knowing that he stood on the precipice of truth and danger. Chapter 8. The Hidden Chamber. A shuddering gasp echoed through the dimly lit hallway of Ashford Manor, slicing through the heavy silence like a knife. Father Brown stood at the threshold of a grand but neglected study, his gaze locked onto the lifeless body sprawled against the oak desk, a fountain pen clutched rigidly in a clenched hand. The candlelight flickered against the walls, adorned with portraits of long-dead owners, casting grotesque shadows that danced in the eerie atmosphere. He felt the chill of the room seep into him, mingling with the urgency of the unfolding drama. It was Lady Enid were the first to enter the room, her well-manicured fingers pressed against her pale throat. Oh, heavens, not again! She stared at the form of her late husband, whose inexplicable demise had shattered the delicate peace of Kembleford. Just a fortnight earlier, his lifeless body had been discovered in the basement, traditionally reserved for wine, but now transformed into a mausoleum of secrets. The village was abuzz with speculation, and Father Brown sensed the mounting tension that enveloped the manor like the ominous fog cloaking the grounds outside. Lady Enid, he said softly, stepping closer to the desk, it appears we have a murder, disguised as a tragedy. She reeled back as if struck, her expression twisting from horror to disbelief. Murder. In this house. Father Brown's sharp eyes scanned the desk. Yes, and perhaps it's intertwined with the events of the last week. Look here. He indicated a scrap of paper, the edge burnt as if hastily extinguished, visible beneath the tremulous hand of the deceased. With delicate precision, he lifted it, revealing a messy scrawl. The hidden chamber, beneath the remnants of the parlour. The hidden chamber? Lady Enid's brow furrowed, puzzling over the words as if searching for some clarity amid the chaos. Whatever it is, he pondered aloud, it's a place you likely know, but have kept secret. It was not merely curiosity that sparked Father Brown's thoughts. It was the deeply ingrained fear that these secrets were suffocating the very life out of Ashford Manor. Lady Enid's composure cracked under the pressure, her voice rising. This house holds so many secrets, Father. It belongs to a lineage of shadows. The chamber refers to a storeroom, where personal effects were buried in disrepair. My husband frequently spoke of it, but I was never interested enough to investigate. Father Brown knotted his brows, recognizing the underlying tremor in her voice. His secrets might have cost him his life. Was Clearwood involved in something illicit, something he feared revealing? The mention of Clearwood pierced her facade. No, he was a good man at heart, even if eccentric. The crack in her voice betrayed her affection for her late husband. Yet Father Brown noticed a flicker of something else, a hint of resentment or perhaps relief. Eccentricity can lead one down narrow paths, lined with desperation. He replied gently, knowing the truth might cut deeper than any knife. Perhaps he discovered what this chamber concealed, something worth killing for. Before she could answer, the cursory footsteps of Sergeant Sullivan drew their attention down the corridor. Father Brown exchanged a knowing glance with her. They could not fall victim to the scrutiny of gossip just yet. The sergeant burst into the study with a grim expression and an accusatory glance at Lady Enid. "Your ladyship, what in blazes is going on here?" "My husband lies dead before us," she said defiantly, drawing herself up. "Or do you intend to lay the blame at my feet again, Sergeant?" Sullivan shifted uneasily. Wouldn't be the first time. But seeing as this man was turned against a desk, I'll have to consider all possibilities. His sharp gaze darted between them, resting heavily on Father Brown. "I'd reckon there's something more to this tale." As the trio stood in the candlelit gloom, tension crackled like the emptiness in the room. Father Brown took a step back, letting the chaos wash over the duo while he examined the walls more closely. The presence of two portraits caught his attention, one a dapper gentleman, the other a portrait of Lady Enid 10 years younger. Both were positioned over what appeared to be a slight indentation in the woodwork, a detail easily overlooked in the sparsity of light. "Father Brown?" Lady Enid's voice wavered, pulling him from his contemplation. "What now?" He turned, deep in thought. "This chamber, it seems to me that it's not simply an old storeroom, but could be connected in ways that are inherently dangerous." "And how, my dear father?" she challenged, her skepticism veiled under layers of dread. "Consider that your husband may have found something he shouldn't have. Perhaps these portraits hide more than a family tree, a lineage tarnished by deception." Before Lady Enid could respond, Father Brown's gaze darted to the floor. There was a scuff in the carpet, leading toward the corner of the room. "Would you permit me?" he asked, kneeling to examine it closely. "Yes, yes," she pressed, her worry rolling off her in waves. He reached for the corner of the carpet and pulled. A hidden latch followed his effort, revealing a trap door that heaved with the weight of years and secrecy. The creak echoed through the silence, a mockery of the trust once inherent within Ashford Manor. His heart raced as he stared into the darkness below. To discover a truth is to open a door that may lead to unspeakable treachery. "Father, don't—" But she didn't finish as the atmosphere thickened. "And the truth is too often dreadful," he whispered, mind racing with the implications. As the trapdoor swung wide open, a rush of cold air escaped from the chamber below, and a glint of something metallic caught his eye. In that instant, a figure from the shadows abruptly appeared at the door. Jasper, the trusted butler, his face pale with a mix of fury and fear. "Father Brown, you must stop this now." But it was too late, for Father Brown had already plunged into the abyss of the hidden chamber, the unfolding mystery drawing him deeper into the trap set by time and treachery. As the darkness wrapped around him, anticipation twisted in his gut. The clues lay there, waiting for him to piece together the fabric of deceit that spread through the manor like a spider's web. As the door slammed shut behind them, the echo resonated with an unsettling finality, heralding a revelation that could shake the very foundations of Kembleford. Chapter 9. The Final Gathering. A thick swirling mist hung over Kembleford as Father Brown paused at the entrance to St. Mary's Church, his breath rising like smoke in the chill morning air. Inside, he could hear the muted sound of voices weaving through the drafts of the ancient stone walls, a symphony of whispered secrets and barely restrained emotions. On this especially dismal day, the parish was holding a gathering for the last time before mourning the recent string of tragedies that had stalked their small community, the latest being the shocking death of Lady Margaret Swan. As he crossed the threshold, Father Brown noticed the heavy atmosphere. The few congregants gathered in the pews had faces drawn with tension, and as he walked past, they leaned closer to one another, maintaining low, conspiratorial tones. The usual comforts of his parishioners had been replaced by a palpable sense of dread. "Father," piped up Mrs. Baxter, her voice a quivering legato, "did you hear about Mrs. Calloway?" Her eyes darted toward the dark oak doors, double-bolted against the drizzling rain. "Yes, poor soul," Father Brown replied gently. "She lost her daughter last week, didn't she?" Mrs. Baxter shook her head vigorously, her features contorting. No, she is dead too, found in the garden, under the old oak." The revelation hung heavy in the air, heavy with the weight of the grave. His heart quickened. It was 2 murders in a matter of weeks. Lady Swan had been a respected figure, her murder swift and brutal, leaving behind a garden of lilies untouched on the altar as her final tribute. Now, it seemed like death stalked them, a spectre emerging from the shadows. "Gather round, everyone," a voice rang out, startling Father Brown from his thoughts. It was the local squire, Sir Edward Carstairs, resplendent in an almost theatrical military coat. "We need to discuss things of great import." Murmurs rolled through the congregation like low thunder. Father Brown observed Sir Edward's clenched fists and the way he avoided eye contact with the crowd, his fidgeting bringing to mind a man well versed in control, yet losing it all. The tension deepened as the villagers assembled in the pews. Father Brown took a seat near the front, acutely aware of an oppressive weight in the room. "Lady Swan was a friend to many of us," Sir Edward continued, his voice baritone yet high-strung. "But there's a rot in our village, a fraudulent evil we cannot ignore. I say it is time to sweep this malevolence clean from our midst. A collective inhalation rushed through the audience. Father Brown could see hearts racing, mud-churning suspicions rising in the fog-laden air. "Ah, but who might this evil be, Sir Edward?" A voice pierced through the gloom. Old Mr. Fletcher, with furrowed brows and a chin quivering with fear. Could be anyone. An outsider looking to tarnish the good name of Kembleford. Sir Edward slammed his fist on the lectern. Could it be Mrs. Calloway herself, seeking revenge in madness? Father Brown smiled faintly, turning his keen gaze towards Mrs. Calloway, who stood trembling at the very back, clutching a handkerchief like a talisman. Her eyes brimmed with tears, and as the squire raved, the awareness of her fragility grew in the atmosphere. "Perhaps we ought to remember the nature of character before snapping into accusations," Father Brown interjected, his voice calm, yet clear. The squire's rant fell under the weight of Father Brown's words. The atmosphere shifted. Eyes turned toward Father Brown, who had mastered the subtle art of redirecting focus. Maddened motives lead one to false accusations. We should instead inquire into our hearts. He regarded the others thoughtfully, for it is in that darkness where we often find the light. Enough of this. The stained glass windows let in a wash of spectral light as a new voice joined, a deep and commanding tone belonging to Lady Eleanor, the late Lady Swan's sister, her demeanor regal but twisted in grief. "This is about vengeance, revenge for the past, not petty arguments." "Then what do you know, dear Lady Eleanor?" asked Father Brown, coaxing out the truth hidden behind her worn elegance. "My dear sister had secrets," she began, a tremor in her voice mingling with horror. "Wickedness, and the only lifeline she had were the letters from her late husband." At that moment, Father Brown's mind raced to the letters he had found hidden away in the parish archives, with a name he had yet to decipher. What if Lady Swan's past had indeed intertwined with her murder? Not just secrets, Lady Eleanor, perhaps a treason that binds us all. The congregation gasped, a collective uncertainty passing like a wave through the pews. "There are whispers about these letters," Father Brown pressed on, observing Lady Eleanor closely, noting a flicker of fear in her expression. "Who might be after them?" "I have no idea. At least one of us knows more than they're letting on," he interjected, the tension crackling like a storm. The eyes of the villagers narrowed, each lost in their tangled thoughts. Suddenly, the church doors flung wide, and the shape of a tall figure emerged, a figure cloaked in black, shrouded not just from the rain, but from the truth. As they stepped inside, time felt suspended. The figure reached into their coat, and most chillingly of all, the unmistakable glint of polished steel met the dim light within the church. The congregation gasped, all eyes wide with terror, as the figure raised the object high, casting a menacing shadow on the old stones. "Father Brown," they boomed, a voice now dripping with malice, "I've been waiting for you." In that suspended moment, as history and mystery collided, Father Brown found himself teetering on the brink of a revelation that promised to change the course for all involved in the presence of secrecy. Would this final gathering reveal the truth, or merely unveil the next thread in the web of despair? The black figure stepped forward, and the church erupted with a cacophony of gasps and murmurs, each soul waiting for something to unfold, a truth that seemed tantalizingly just out of reach. Chapter 10. The Revelation Through Faith. The damp air hung thick in the quiet village of Kembleford, an eerie mist that seemed to cloak the world in a hushed stillness. The remnants of the past clung to the historic manor, Wingate Hall, its timbers creaking like aged bones as gusts of wind rattled against the castle-like structure. Father Brown, clad in his comfortable brown cloak, was making his way through the hall's dimly lit corridors, a faint flicker of candlelight guiding his steps, like a beacon in the dark. It was just past dusk, and an unsettling shiver crawled up his spine as he recalled the tragic death of Lady Violetta Worthington, whose body had been found only days ago, lying cold in her drawing room. On the mantel above that very room, now a sealed crime scene, stood a cracked picture frame that hadn't held a picture for years. There were whispers that Lady Violetta had left behind a letter, a revelation of some sort, though none had been discovered. As Father Brown turned a corner, his shoes echoed against the wooden floorboards, leading him toward the drawing room itself, where Mrs. Craven, the housekeeper, was engaged in frantic tidying, despite the tragedy that stained the air. The frown on her face suggested that she was not merely tidying, she was hiding something beneath the surface, just as the fog hid the depths of the grounds outside. "Father," Mrs. Craven's voice quivered, her hands clasped tightly before her. "Please, I beg you to leave this place. There's far too much evil surrounding it. I fear what you may find." Father Brown paused, contemplating her words. "Mrs. Craven, I must see for myself. It is the only way to understand the truth of Lady Violetta's death, a truth to which you seem far too close." The housekeeper swallowed, eyes darting to the fireplace, where a solitary flame danced in webs of shadow. "You don't know the stories, Father. The portrait of the late Lord Worthington still hangs here. Some say it carries a curse. What you uncover may not be mere earthly sin." Father Brown raised an eyebrow, but did not let her words deter him. Instead, he approached the dressed mantel, noting the oddities that the cluttered furnishings revealed. Beside a crooked ceramic figurine, a dust-covered diary lay half-hidden. Its worn leather binding offered a quiet, yet insistent invitation. "Ah, the diary of Lady Violetta," he murmured, carefully lifting it open. The faded ink revealed a delicate script, thoughts unraveling like a flower blossoming from a frozen bud. But as he flipped through, the initial euphoria waned into confusion, each entry revealing mundane affairs of social gatherings and charitable functions, save for the final passage that shook him to the core. June 14th. Dearest Father, what a shame it is that I must hide the knowledge my heart has cradled. I cannot explain the dreams that haunt my sleep. I hear whispers from that damned portrait. The answers I seek lie buried with him. But he is not the only secret keeper. The final line trailed off, cut short, as if she had felt a hand grasping at her throat, intending to stifle her voice. Father Brown frowned, his mind racing through possibilities. What knowledge had Lady Violetta unearthed that warranted a deadly silence? Moreover, who might benefit from her demise? The terms of her will had surfaced earlier, but the beneficiaries were an odd assortment. Family, friends, and even a shrine to the village church dedicated to Saint Gregor. "Mrs. Craven," he said, closing the diary, "who do you suspect would have wanted to silence Lady Violetta? Was there anyone who stood at odds with her?" Her eyes narrowed, revealing the deeper currents of anxiety that flowed beneath her composed exterior. There were whispers. Mr. Gregory would argue with her. The villagers considered him possessive after she began to divert funds to the church. A sort of rift grew. Perhaps others wished to see it severed. Father Brown nodded, thoughtfully, recalling Mr. Gregory, the parish clerk, a man whose religious fervor often bordered on fanaticism. And do you believe he might have opposed her charity? Opposed? More like incited, exclaimed Mrs. Craven, her emotions boiling over. He believed her intentions led the souls of innocents astray. To him, rectitude must precede benevolence. As their conversation unfolded, the weight of her words pressed against him. Father Brown considered the portrait theirs. Lord Worthington, himself, a man shrouded by dark speculation, cast past even Lady Violetta's existence. Was it in this picture that secrets were revealed, secrets that could lead to a murderer? Before he could voice these thoughts, a commotion erupted in the hallway. A shadowy figure darted past him, clutching a crumpled piece of paper. "Stop!" Father Brown yelled instinctively as he lunged toward the door. But the figure vanished into the abyss of the thickening mist outside, leaving only an echo of hurried steps. Father Brown was left alone, with the air thick with portent. Gripped by both intrigue and anxiety, he raised his candle higher, illuminating the words of Lady Violetta that lingered in his mind. "The answers I seek lie buried with him." What had she discovered that sealed her fate? The night deepened, wrapping Kembleford in a shroud of secrets, and Father Brown's heart raced. He returned to the diary, realizing there was one more thing to uncover. Before it was too late, what secrets had Lady Violetta truly found, and how deeply did they intertwine with the tendrils of faith that ruled Kembleford? The churchyard's shadows beckoned, where perhaps even the dead could offer whispers of revelation. Following a lead could guide him toward the truth. If only he could press through the fog before the dawn broke. And with the diary clenched tightly, Father Brown made his way to the crypt that lay beneath the church, where he hoped perhaps the keys to the mystery and his salvation awaited him. Chapter 11. The Truth Behind the Mask. The air in Kembleford was thick with fog that morning, as if the village itself held its breath in anticipation of the truth. Father Brown strolled through the churchyard, the damp grass yielding underfoot, as he contemplated the events of the previous weeks. He stopped suddenly, a chill creeping up his spine. There, half hidden behind the ancient tombstones, lay something startling, a bloodied white mask, its features twisted in a grimace of silent terror. Father Brown knelt down, his heart pounding, as he examined the object. The mask was synonymous with the masquerade ball held just days ago at the Grand Hunstanton Manor, an event marked by intrigue and the accidental death of Lady Eleanor, a tragedy that had engulfed the village in whispers and accusations. Though the details of her demise were still fogged in uncertainty, it was clear that someone among them was hiding behind a mask far more dangerous than mere fabric. As he held the mask, carefully, he could hear the soft crunch of footsteps on the gravel path behind him. It was Mrs. McCarthy, the parish housekeeper, her cheeks flushed from the brisk air. "Father, I thought I might find you here. Have you discovered anything?" she asked, her tone laced with both concern and curiosity. He turned the mask over in his hands. "I believe this has more to reveal than just its ghastly appearance, Mrs. McCarthy. Do you recall who wore this particular mask at the ball?" "I can think of two," she replied, crossing her arms. "Millicent, Lady Eleanor's niece, and Josephine from the next village over. Both had motives, though what they were at that event—" Her voice trailed off. "Precisely," Father Brown replied, a thought emerging from the depths of his mind. What if it was not the wearer, but what they aimed to hide beneath the mask? It's often our secrets that drive us to madness. As he contemplated this observation, the curly-haired figure of Inspector French appeared at the perimeter of the churchyard, straw hat perched precariously on his head. "Father," he called, "I could use a word with you." Father Brown stood, the mask tucked safely in his coat. "Inspector French, what brings you here? I understood you had a case file to pursue." "I did," French admitted, adjusting his glasses, a frown creasing his forehead. "But with walls closing in regarding Lady Eleanor's death, the pressure's mounting to wrap this up quickly. We need to interview the attendees again. Some seem less than forthcoming with their accounts." "Did any new evidence come to light in those interviews?" Father Brown asked, his mind racing with possibilities. "Interestingly enough, we found a torn piece of fabric caught on a wrought iron gate near the manor. It matches the dress worn by none other than Lady Eleanor the night she died," Inspector French noted, eagerly gesturing towards a nearby bench where he had spread some notes. Father Brown approached, studying the delicate fabric. "It suggests a struggle, but tell me, Inspector, what of those who might have wanted Lady Eleanor out of the picture?" French hesitated. "You think there's intent behind this? Perhaps a jealousy from Millicent? Perhaps, or perhaps from her mother, the lady's own sister. Secrets can bind, but they can also tear families apart. Wasn't there talk of an inheritance?" "A sizable one, yes, which means both women had motives, though I doubt either would go so far as murder," Inspector French mused. "Ah, but therein lies the complexity of human nature, Inspector," Father Brown replied, reflecting on Millicent's recent behavior, a marked change from sweet to temperamental after her aunt's unpredictable health. Their conversation faltered as a piercing cry interrupted them. They turned to see Millicent, her dark hair disheveled as she approached, a frantic look in her eye. "Father Brown, Inspector, come quickly." Her voice was tight, and she looked as if she'd seen a ghost. "What is it, my child?" Father Brown asked, instinctively sensing the urgency in her voice. "It's Josephine," Millicent gasped between deep breaths. "I found her in the library unconscious. There was something amiss, and now I fear—" "Fear what, Millicent?" Father Brown pressed, his eyes narrowing as he took 2 strides forward. "A note," she replied, glancing over her shoulder. "It was addressed to her, and it said something terrible." "Show us," French urged, his voice a mixture of authority and concern. They hurried back to the manor, its grand structure looming ominously against the mist. Inside, the library was dimly lit, the smell of old books mingling with a hint of something else. Fear. There lay Josephine on the rug, a faint breath escaping her lips. Millicent knelt beside her, shaking her gently. "Josephine, wake up." French approached, instinctively checking for signs of life. He noted the small scrap of paper clutched in Josephine's hand. Carefully, he pried it free and unfolded it, reading aloud the words scrawled in an erratic hand. "She knew too much." Father Brown felt a prickle of realization. A warning, a message from someone who feared she would speak out about the inheritance. But whoever wrote this had reason to deceive. A final thought coalesced in his mind. "Will she be all right?" Millicent asked, worry etching her features. "Her condition," Father Brown began, but he paused abruptly as a loud thump echoed through the manor, interrupting him. He turned. Sharply, someone else was here. The 3 of them launched into the hallway, only to discover the sound had come from the study, the door swinging ajar. Father Brown exchanged a tense glance with Inspector French before stepping into the dimness, feeling dread curl in his stomach. What lay beyond the door promised revelations that could shatter everything they thought they knew. But just as they crossed the threshold, a voice, calm yet disturbing, floated out from the shadows. "Did you really think you could uncover the truth? You're all too late." Father Brown felt a chill creep up his spine as the voice belonged not to Josephine, but to someone they had least suspected. The words echoed in his mind as the plot thickened ever more. Time was running out. Chapter 12. The Confession That Changed Everything. A low fog drifted over the quaint village of Kembleford, clinging to the cobblestones like a shroud. The gas lamps flickered, casting dancing shadows against the creaky facades of centuries-old homes. Inside the rectory, the atmosphere was thick with tension as Father Brown prepared for a meeting that threatened to unravel the very fabric of the village. The last remnants of a storm whispering through the eaves outside seemed to echo his inner. "Did it. I killed him." The words hung in the air, heavy with despair and determination. Father Brown studied his face, searching for clues, yet all he saw was turmoil. "But why, my son?" he asked gently. Leonard's eyes flickered with fear and something more, something deeper. "The Lord, he threatened to take away my land. My family has worked that plot for generations. I couldn't let him destroy my legacy." "He wanted to buy you out then," Father Brown encouraged, sensing a deeper truth lurking beneath Leonard's confession. The village had indeed been troubled by unsettling rumors regarding Lord Hargrove's grand ambitions. Yet, the motives behind murder were often more complex than financial gain. Aye, but it wasn't just that. There was something darker. Leonard fidgeted, his handsome features contorting with guilt. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "I saw him with my own eyes. He was blackmailing Annabel." Annabel? The vicar's daughter? The connection struck Father Brown like a flash of lightning. Annabel's recent distress made sense now. Her pallor and hesitance were not mere demureness, but born of secret terror. What did he have on her? With a deep breath, Leonard continued. "The Lord knew Annabel's mother used to perform in music halls. The scandal could have ruined her, yet it seems he both desired her and wanted to extinguish her. I couldn't bear to see her like that. I just lost control." It is often in the criminal mind that the heart becomes an abyss, Father Brown reflected, still skeptical of Leonard's wholesale confession. It was easy to yield to panic and claim guilt, yet his instincts indicated further layers to the evident turmoil. As Leonard's regret filled the room, the atmosphere morphed from desperation to something else. "Have you spoken to Annabel?" "I went to find her after. She was gone. I thought she could confirm my story. Now," Leonard clenched his fists, "I fear she could be in danger." "Why would she be in danger?" Father Brown probed. "Because the Lord was tied to other men. Men who don't take kindly to losing." Leonard's voice dipped. "I believe he had them after us." The spectre of fear gripped Father Brown as threads tightened around a chilling sense of urgency. "We must find her at once." The urgency in his voice seemed to connect with Leonard's own desperation, igniting a flicker of resolve in the blacksmith's eyes. With Leonard in tow, Father Brown hastened to the church, a quiet haven amidst the chaos. The aged stones loomed large, each arch whispering secrets from ages past. He recalled a conversation with Mrs. Pringle about an old laundry at the edge of the village, a forgotten relic that might reveal more about Lord Hargrove's clandestine dealings. As they neared the laundry house, the lingering mist enveloped them in silence, making the adventure feel more like a spectral walk than a search for answers. The door creaked ominously as they stepped inside. Jagged wooden beams jutted out like skeletal fingers, draped with cobwebs of neglect. "That window," Father Brown murmured, his keen eye catching glimpses of something askew. He stepped closer, noticing a faint smudge on the floorboards leading to a shadowy corner. "This place has been disturbed recently." Leonard followed, his brow furrowing. They uncovered a crumpled piece of parchment, half hidden beneath the floor, where the wheel once turned. "There's handwriting," Father Brown said softly. He studied it, carefully observing the meticulous strokes that spelled out a name, the Duchess of Wythe, a connection to the Lord's dealings. "Blackmail, perhaps?" Leonard mused in awe. "Yes, and if she were involved, we'd have our motive." "But alas, the shadow grows larger," Father Brown replied, rising with the parchment in hand. "We must learn what she knows, but—" Suddenly, the soft creaking of the door echoed throughout the hall, and then another figure slipped through, the silhouette of a woman, her face obscured by the veil she wore. They all froze, the suspense grating like a hammer on iron. "Leonard," she gasped, voice trembling, "you have to run. They're coming for you." Father Brown's instincts flared as the truth turned sharper, the sinister thread woven tighter. But before he could voice a question, the woman's hand slid from the veil, revealing Annabelle's face. With eyes wide and fearful, she pointed urgently toward the door. "They know." The room filled with an overwhelming sense of dread, the storm outside matching the tempest within. "This is only the beginning," Father Brown thought desperately as the walls seemed to tremble around them. Who were they, and how many more secrets lay within the confines of Kembleford? As Leonard reached for Annabelle, shadows danced outside, and a chilling roar of thunder echoed in the distance. The night was just unraveling, but the conviction simmered. Some truths were buried beneath layers of deceit, and with every heartbeat, the unraveling thread of humanity drew closer to the knife's edge. Father Brown's mind raced with possibilities, but one thing was clear: the light ahead was fading fast. The restless night was far from over.